Hello everyone and good afternoon and welcome to this Microsoft Teams webinar. My name is Simon Jefferies and I work for Complete IT, who are part of the Sharp group. Now, of course, over the last few months, Teams has been quite a popular tool for lots of businesses around the world to be using, mainly for instant messaging and video conferencing. And in fact, at the start of the UK lockdown, there was something like 16 million new Microsoft 365 tenants introduced or created as the kind of working from home style work started. So Teams has become very much a big part of many businesses. Now, of course, because of that, lots of people are very familiar with the kind of core messaging features of Teams. And therefore, within this webinar, we wanted to try and concentrate on the other parts of Teams outside of messaging and chatting, etc. Sort of more the workspace style features. We've got Complete IT themselves have got over 700 SMEs which we support, and we've had quite over the last few months quite a number of queries around other things that Teams can do, or training requirements. So we thought we'd try and answer some of those in this webinar, just to try and hopefully educate some of you to what else Teams can offer, and just to give you some ideas about what you might be able to do with it or use it for. So a little bit of an agenda, just a little bit of a Teams overview for anyone that's not completely familiar with it at the present time. We'll then look at the teams, channels, and structuring within the main core Teams component itself. Data retention becoming more and more important, especially with clients we're supporting, where as more businesses begin to use more components of Microsoft Teams and therefore put more data into it, it's important that we ensure data retention is set for data to be removed when it's no longer required, but also for data that needs to be kept for legal reasons or compliancy reasons for specific company or organisation requirements. And then we move on to touch upon Teams expiration, because Teams can become quite quickly out of control unless it's managed properly. So if you don't help your employees understand how to use Teams and use channels, etc., then people will create Teams willy-nilly, which is fine, which they can do out of the box, but it can quite quickly turn into an organisation having hundreds of teams. So Microsoft have now provided the ability to remove Teams in an automatic way for any that haven't been used for a set period of time. And then we'll look at sensitivity labels. So again, around the data that's stored in Teams, we can obviously restrict who has access to this data, but we also need to be able to protect particularly sensitive data from being accessed outside of Teams. People have the rights generally to copy data from Teams, download files, etc. If they're taken away and opened on private computers, we want to ensure that only the people that have the correct access should be able to open them and review those files. So Microsoft have now introduced their kind of information security plans or feature set to Teams as well. And then we move on to Teams Rooms, which will provide provides a kind of conferencing environment for your meeting rooms within the offices. Obviously, for a lot of businesses, not used heavily at the moment, but still an important part of Teams. And then Teams Live Events, which is similar to what we're using here. Teams now has the ability to stream live webinars like we're doing. So we'll just touch upon that. And then finally, just to go over a couple of new features that Microsoft have recently introduced or are introducing, which is quite nice features coming on board. So bit of a Teams overview. Teams was launched in March 2017, so it's still a fairly young product. It's part of the Microsoft 365 platform, so pretty much all Microsoft 365 plans you purchase will have a Teams license. But over and above that, Microsoft have now also recently made Teams available for consumers free of charge. So all you require is a free Microsoft account, whether it be Hotmail, Outlook.com, etc. And you can use Teams certainly for messaging and voice calls, etc. For free. everything that we've been using so far this year for the majority of businesses at a high level: instant messaging, voice calls, video calls, and of course it extends out, which is what we're going to concentrate more on today, is file storage and application integration. Teams is replacing Skype for Business. So Skype for Business has been a product of Microsoft for a large number of years, originated from something called Microsoft Link, but it is slowly being phased out, and as of July next year, Skype for Business will be removed from Microsoft 365 totally. So for anybody that's still using Skype for Business, you really need to start to think about moving away from this. And actually, Microsoft provide migration tools and features within the Microsoft 365 platform to help you or assist you move from Skype to Teams within your business. And Teams is considered as a workspace similar to that of Slack. So it's not just about messaging, etc. We can bring together people to collaborate on work. We can bring applications together. We can help people work together on specific tasks or projects. So when you understand what else it can offer, you'll kind of see that the messaging and the voice call features, etc., are just kind of a very small part of it in comparison with what else it can do. And Teams can now provide full telephony. So before it's just via internet, but now we can assign full phone numbers environments to people within the organisation, along with auto attendance and call queues, and voice recording, etc. So you can actually now utilize Teams for the full telephony experience, if you like, with handsets or soft phones, etc. And for many businesses and business users, Teams is the primary tool in daily working life. So it certainly is for me. I spend more of my time in Teams than I do in Outlook now. And given that we've all been at Complete IT been working from different locations in the last few months, it's been invaluable for us to continue to do what we, collaborate together and work together, and it's been a real help for us. So Teams, channels, and structure. So what does a team consist of? Well, it's a collection of people, so internal resources and resources, and you can use this for projects, business processes, different departments within your business, any kind of client project requirements, etc. And a team can be a public team, so anyone in your organization can join it. Invite only, so it can be seen by everyone, but you have to be accepted to join. Or it can be completely private, so it's invisible to everyone, and it's just kind of invite only. You can also invite external guests, which is really quite nice given the collaborative experience you get with Teams. And if you're using Teams and channels to work with clients on specific projects of theirs or for other tasks with clients, you can now invite them in and collaborate with them together on the piece of work that you're undertaking with them. And then under a team, you'll get multiple channels, which we'll go into in a second. And you can restrict the actions of the members of the team that they can perform. So, if you don't want them to do certain features, which we'll look at when we have a look at the Teams console, we can actually restrict what they can do, as well as restricting who can access the team. So a channel, what does it consist of? A channel is a dedicated section within a team, and you can have really as many channels as you would like per team. And within each channel, you will then get multiple tabs, and each tab might contain different things, such as a file store. It might contain an Excel sheet, a Word document. It might have a link to a third-party application. It might be a chat window, and it might be links to specific websites if you're undertaking projects for clients and you're looking at different products for them. There's quite an exhaustive list of integrations that Teams can now provide. And by doing this, you can bring a lot of components together that you're working with for projects, rather than having to open them up all separately, individually in different web browsers, or opening up Word and opening Excel files, etc. They can all quite easily and quickly be brought together in the Teams channel and accessed as required. And because Teams is available across multiple platforms, Windows, Mac, iPads, etc., and even Linux now, the experience is consistent across all those platforms. So no matter what device you're using, you'll get the same experience, which makes accessing and collaborating with your colleagues and clients very easy. And people work with channels for conversations, data, apps, and you can even have bots, etc. in there. And there's plenty of other Microsoft 365 tools that provide a high level of automation, which we haven't got time to go through today, but you can undertake lots of automation within Teams using things like Power Automate and using other tools such as Microsoft Planner and Microsoft Forms as part of that, and we can show you a couple of those in a bit. And channels can be set as standard or private. So on a previous slide, we said we can add members to Teams, and by default, every team member will have access to all channels. If they're set to standard, they have access to them, but now there's a newer private channel which allows us to restrict who has access to that. And this could be useful if, for example, you have a team that you use for client projects, and each channel under that you may have a different client, a different project. So you can then invite clients to specific channels, and they will then only be able to see their data and not anyone else's. So that's quite a nice way to be able to collaborate with guests without, causing a data breach. And how should a team be structured? So you should start with a small number of teams and members. If we go all out and just start giving everyone access to everything and allow them to create what they like before they really understand how Teams works, it can quite quickly become, your number of teams can grow quite substantially. In fact, at CIT, when we first started to use it, that thing happened, and within 6 months, I think we had something like over 300 teams, which isn't ideal, and they can't be managed simply that way. So you should actually think about what you're going to use the teams for, and what processes, projects, and departments within the business might make use of these teams. Think about how you could use Teams to work with clients and client projects. We've kind of just touched on that. But a good way, like we said, it's a good way to share information and collaborate with clients on. And begin with initial channels, so not to overwhelm people. So if we have a team with 25 channels under it, that could frighten people off, and they may not use it effectively. So I think the best thing to do is start out with a smaller number of teams for specific requirements with a smaller number of channels, so that everyone in the business can get used to how it works and how people interact with each other through it. So then channels should be considered as topics or work streams to assist with your organising of your work and to achieve objectives within the business or with your clients. And also under every team, there is a channel called General. And this can't be changed or deleted, but you can make this as something that's consistently used throughout each of your team. And it can be used to provide things like an overview of what the team's trying to achieve, and to provide new members of the team with a kind of high level of information so that they can understand what it's trying to do. So if you get new employees within your business and they begin to use Teams, they'll know that the general channel under each team gives them all the information they need to be able to start to use the team effectively. And of course, you can use it for a general discussion about the team if you so wish. Microsoft best practice is to create teams with a larger set of members and craft channels based on work. So rather than having hundreds of teams, have far fewer, but with more channels once the organisation's bought into the Teams ecosystem and is familiar with working with it. And also, it's important to think about how you want to use those private channels. We mentioned a minute ago that we can use them to provide guests with access to the data that they should only see, but it's important to note that once you create a private channel, you can't convert it back to a standard channel and vice versa. So you have to design everything and think about how you need to implement it correctly before doing so. And also, we can provide moderators if we would like. So again, going back to the example of client projects, there may be we want to add moderation to the chat section or the post section, so that the client doesn't see data or information that they shouldn't do in case it was accidentally posted, or somebody writes the incorrect thing. Then we can moderate what we put into channels so that the wrong information isn't sent to the wrong person. And if you're going to eventually end up with a kind of process where you'll create a team for a specific task, and under that team there might be multiple channels with lots of configuration we can actually use templates to help you create those, so that we don't have to create teams and channels and configuration from scratch throughout. So it's quite creates a nice ease of deployment for people going forward. So if we have a quick look, if everyone can see this, this is just an example. It's a very small environment, but here at the high level we have teams. So this one's called the widget company. We have one for marketing, one for technical news, human resources and training. So under each of these is then the channels, and as I mentioned, the general channel is here. Now within the manage team section, I'll just show you some of what you can do. So here we can add in who are owners, and here we'll have a list of members and guests. This will detail the channels, but a piece about the settings here is what we provide our guests, or sorry, our members access to do. You can see you can block certain components of it, and it's important to note that guests get far fewer options, so they don't have any of this by default, and we can just, they have nothing by default. They can collaborate, but they can't actually modify a channel or remove tabs or do anything unless we allow them to. You can spice up channels if you like by adding a team picture or teams with team picture, and then there's little bits around, you know, fun stuff which you can use if you wish. And a team code is useful for those larger organizations that might have quite a number of teams, and you want someone to join a team, you can just send them a code so they don't have to go searching for that team. And once a team's established and being used, there are some analytics that you can view around it on here. There's also in the Microsoft 365 Administration Center a whole array of reporting and analytics that you can see, or the administrators of your tenants can see. So you can pull data from there. Obviously this is a test tenant, so there's very little going on here, but that just shows you can actually see what's going on the activity on your channels and team. And here's just all of the apps that we've got linked in with our current tenant. So under the team here we have our channels. So we use this as a kind of project example. So here we have post section, so anything that's added to the channel will post into here, and people can also start a new conversation, as you can see down there, and you can just chat about this particular project for a client. We have some files. So with every channel, a file repository is created, and here we can see you can create as many folders as you would like. But a nice feature to note here is the sync button. And if you use Microsoft OneDrive for Business and you click the sync button, it will actually make a copy of the data within this library here onto your device, so that you can then access it as if it were like a traditional mapped drive. And that's very useful if you're working on a couple of projects or a number of projects, and you want to be able to access data from Windows Explorer in a more traditional way. But anything you make a change to will obviously sync back to Teams, and anything that's changed in Teams will sync to your device. So that's quite a nice little feature. And of course, then once you finish with that project, you can remove the sync and just return, leave the data where it is. And here we've just got an example of adding in a kind of Word document. So if this was as it suggests, a project for an Office 365 migration, we might link in the proposal here. It's just pretty much that document, because obviously it's just a demo, but then you can also use Teams as an editor. So if it's Excel, Word, etc., you can actually edit documents in here with your colleagues if you wish. We've then here got a kind of plan using Microsoft Planner. For those of you that don't know, Microsoft Planner is a kind of mini project planning tool where we can create phases of a project, add in particular tasks, assign tasks and end dates to particular individuals, and then they will get alerted when they have to, by the time they need to complete a task. So it's quite a nice feature of it. And then we've linked in particular guides for some products we might be using, and so on and so forth. So this is a kind of example of one we might use for a client project. And then maybe for an internal marketing team, you might have different channels, one for surveys, one for developing a company website, one for corporate branding, maybe one for product review. And in here we might have sort of forms and product review. So this is using Microsoft Forms that we can link in. about certain things we can do, and then we can look at results we've got from that by linking it all in. And if you kind of get the idea, if we add lots of tabs along the top, we can bring a lot of stuff together. And if we actually click the plus button to add more tabs, you'll see all of the different apps and external apps. It's not just Microsoft. There's quite a number here, hundreds of different apps you can tie into in order to bring lots of different services into Teams. So it's quite a number here. And just a couple more examples. So here we've got a team, a technical team within like Complete I.T might use, which just links into various updates from things like Microsoft and AWS. As Microsoft posts details, they might it just links in and automatically updates within Teams so people can keep up to date on technologies, etc. So there's quite a lot we can do within this, linking in videos. So I mean, you've got to spend quite a bit of time sitting down and working out how you most effectively use your teams and channels and how people should access those, etc. And making sure they're structured correctly so people do work from them in the most efficient manner. So just starting out without thinking about that, you're going to end up with lots of teams and channels that aren't really relevant and will end up not being used and just becoming a bit of a mess. So it might be a bit overwhelming to start with, but I think once you get your kind of head around how it all links and works together, it's actually a really powerful tool. So go on to retention. So why use retention policies? Well, Teams can be quickly, house lots of data. As you can see there, we've had lots of, potentially lots of teams and lots of channels with document libraries in each channel, and a lot of that data will be very important. And of course, businesses have internal policies, industry-led policies, or legal regulations that they have to adhere to with their data. Some businesses may want to retain all data for a certain period of time, and some may need to actually remove data after a specific period of time, or to ensure that they're not in liability with anyone anything in their organization by keeping data for longer than they should. And as a default, Teams will keep data indefinitely, so it will be there forever. But with Microsoft 365, you have something called the Compliance Center, and this will allow the implementation of what are called retention policies for Teams, chats, and channel messages, as well as file data. So retention periods are part of Microsoft 365 for the majority of the core components of SharePoint, OneDrive, email, but you can now extend these to use with data contained within Teams. And retention policies and Compliance Center should be used for Microsoft 365 groups and Teams channel messages, which will show you in a sec. So if we go back to the screen again, and here we have the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, just to quickly show you what a retention policy can do. So we just give it a name. And here we can actually specify how long we keep data for. So whether it's forever or for this long, and that can be years, days, months, whatever it might be. And then we can specify whether the data is retained based on when it was created or when it was last modified, and what we want to do with it after the time has expired. So we can say we want to delete it. We can go on to then choose what we want to do it for. And as you can see, we can choose all different areas of Microsoft 365, but specifically for Teams, we choose the groups and the Teams channel messages. And then this would be, and then you can go obviously choose the teams you want to apply this to, or you can select all of the teams if you wish. And then this would be applied to all of that data and channel messages within that environment, so that if someone accidentally deletes something or tries to accidentally delete something or deliberately delete something, that it's going to be retained and it can be recovered. It should be used as a backup, but it's there just to ensure compliance. Quite a useful feature. So Teams expiration. So we've obviously gone over, how it's important to plan and define how you use your teams and channels. And if not managed correctly, it can grow quite quickly out of control, leading to hundreds, maybe thousands of teams. And of course, there will inevitably be some teams that you've created that don't ever really get used or become stale. And some teams might serve a purpose and then are no longer required. But now Microsoft have provided the ability to set an expiration for selected or all teams. So you can set a lifetime of 100, 180, 365, or even custom amounts of days before they expire. And when it gets towards that expiry time, group owners will be notified 30 days prior to expiry, and then again 15 days. And after that, the team will be removed. But within those notifications, the team owner can actually renew that team via a link in the email if they wish. So again, we'll just show that bit quickly. So it's very simple to set under an expiration section in Microsoft 365. We simply set a lifetime. We set an email address for any team that doesn't have an owner for whatever reason to be notified instead, and then we can select all groups or selected and just add from our list of teams that you see here. And then that's as simple as that. So then we know that after that time, any team that hasn't been used will have a kind of self cleanup to it unless the owner decides that they still require it. And it's worth noting, if you've got retention policies in place, any data that hasn't fallen outside of that retention will not be deleted via this mechanism here. So teams sensitivity. Some data will be of a sensitive nature and require additional protection in the teams. And of course, with Teams being a flexible, accessible platform available from multiple devices, it's quite easy for people to copy data off if they wish. So even if we've created like a private channel, the data within it can still be copied away and accessed on other devices if the user requires. Now, Microsoft have some information security features which have been a part of Microsoft 365 for quite a number of years, and they've recently brought this to be a part of Microsoft Teams. So with that, we can set things like content expiry. So when data is accessed, we can actually set it to expire after a certain period. We can restrict access to data so it can't be accessed offline, so someone's copied it away and using it on another machine. Important piece is we can encrypt it to only allow access to data with a Microsoft 365 account. So on a business machine, it will be seamless to you. You open a file, it opens up as normal. But on a non-business machine, if you try and open an encrypted file, it will ask or prompt you for your Microsoft 365 credential. And if, of course, you don't have one, or your account's been disabled because you may have left the business, then you're not going to get access to that data. And that way, it doesn't matter if someone's copied data away from Teams, it cannot be accessed without a valid account. So we know we're protecting those. And we can also apply automatic labels and encryption depending on document content. So if you have documents or spreadsheets, etc., that might contain things like credit card information, other personal information like driving license numbers, or even specific to you as a business, specific account number, formats, etc., you can actually have Microsoft 365 automatically encrypt it and even apply labels which put, a kind of diagonal message across in back of the sheet or document or Excel sheet saying confidential, for example, if you so wish. So these will be easily set. So when we create a team, I'll show you in a sec, you will have an option to select the relevant sensitivity label when you create the team. So actually, I can show you in a sec, but you create all of these in the Microsoft 365 Security Center, and you then select on those labels what you would like them to do, encryption, whether you'd like it to expire, etc. And then those labels will appear to be used with Teams when you create them. You can also add these labels to existing teams if you wish to do so. So if we nip back to here, simple case I've got in the security center, but I just quickly show you what you can do. So encryption settings, you can apply encryption immediately as soon as you apply this, or apply it, or allow users to apply it at their own free will. We can send content to expire on a specific date or after a specific number of days of the policy being applied, and then we can assign specific people to the whole tenant or individuals in the organisation. And then if we do that, we then can provide auto labeling here based on conditions for different criteria. That might be, like I said, credit card numbers, specific account information, driver license numbers, etc. So, we can, apply sensitive content blocking or encryption through automation dependent on content, through automation dependent on which team the data's in, or through people manually assigning those labels. So within Teams itself, we won't actually cover this, but for a creation of a new team, it's just down here. We click Create Team, and as you can see here, we can create one from scratch. Now, the reason why I put that screenshot on is because the sensitivity labels within Microsoft Teams is being rolled out as we speak by Microsoft, and eventually that box will be up here. So I had to take a screenshot because it's not available in this test tenant thus far. So ultimately, once you create your labels, you'll be able to select them at this level. So if we move on now to Teams Rooms. Teams Rooms is a really nice feature that allows you to make more effective use of your kind of general or your shared meeting spaces in your office environment. So obviously in our offices, when we're all there, you have maybe one or many meeting rooms, and people have generally, we've seen it before, put laptops in there that you're all kind of looking at when you're having a kind of big round the table meeting with people externally. You might have a TV on the wall that you have to plug your laptop in and maybe a mic in. But with Teams Rooms, we will use dedicated hardware, so screens, speakers, microphones, and a computer within the meeting areas that provide all of that functionality. So you no longer have to take your laptop in if you don't wish and plug it into everything. It's there for you. It's designed to allow an entire room to participate in the meeting. So you would specify all of this hardware and kit with enough mics and speakers to accommodate the whole room so that everyone could be clearly heard and also hear what's going on from outside attendees. And when simply adding a Teams room to a calendar invite is very easy. There's a section within a calendar invite that says which room would you like to add, and you simply select the relevant Teams room and off you go. And then within that Teams room itself, you can create ad hoc meetings from the control panel, which we should have on the screen in a sec. So Teams room itself, panel on the wall, we would have a camera and then a couple of mics on the table and a speaker, and also a control panel here. And as I said, if we create a meeting request, here we've got our attendees, and under location, we've selected a kind of meeting room, and that will then automatically add it to the required. And when you send the meeting request, it will then block that timeout in the meeting room diary so that no one else can use it. And when you're in the meeting room, you'll have a control panel in there which details all the meetings for that day, allows you to join, and as soon as you click join, it fires up the TV, fires up the mics and the camera, and off you go. Then people join in. But if you need to create ad hoc meetings, you can just create a new meeting and then just search your address list for the people you'd like to add. So very convenient, and of course you don't need laptops to control any of this. Of course, if you're in the meeting room and you want to project something from your laptop to the meeting, that's the same as before. You just add the meeting, join the meeting yourself, and off you go and project what you have on your desktop. So quite simple and easy. And then we have Teams live events. So we're obviously using this GoToMeeting technology now, and there's things like Zoom, etc. But Microsoft now have their ability to provide a full webinar experience using Teams, and they call it live events. It allows you to broadcast the webinar meeting or video content to larger audiences. So where people, the listeners, cannot participate with their webcams and audio devices. It's configured very simply through a regular meeting request within the Teams client itself. So for regular Teams meetings, you can do that from Outlook or from Teams, but for Teams live events, you do that directly from the Teams calendar section itself. Now, a live event provides a producer, presenter, and attendee views and roles. So the producer would be used to ensure the content that's being displayed on the screen currently, to line up additional content from other presenters to display who's speaking, and that they kind of, as it sets the producer, so they can make sure that everything that's being displayed to the attendees is correct. And that leaves then the presenters, of which you can have multiple presenters, to carry on with what they're doing correctly without having to worry about organising what's on the screen. And of course, the attendee view, so for the external recipients. So attendees obviously can, if they already have Teams, then it's straight in, but people without Teams will not need to sign up for any account. They will just simply have a link that they receive in an email or calendar request, like we do with the webinar we've got today, and they click that, and they have a choice of joining via web client or via downloading the Teams client to access the content. Attendees can ask questions via a dedicated panel, like with most of these tools, and Microsoft Stream, which is another Microsoft 365 service, is used to stream and record an event. So this is a little bit different to things like Zoom and GoToMeeting, whereas there is a delay from people speaking to when the attendee sees it. So this is where it might fall behind a little bit at the moment. So what happens when you start a webinar with Microsoft Teams live events, it immediately starts recording into Microsoft Stream, and then Microsoft Stream will buffer between 20 and 30 seconds of that before the attendee sees it. So in that respect, what you're saying now is being heard by the attendee maybe 30 seconds later. And that's generally not too much of an issue, but it kind of falls down a little bit when attendees ask questions, because if you are, any more questions kind of thing at the end, and if no one asks anything, or you might not seem anyone's asking anything, because it's they're not hearing that for another 30 seconds. So it's kind of one of the reasons why we're not using Teams live events today, or haven't been before yet, because of that delay. It just provides just a little bit too much of a delay to make it effective on certain parts of a webinar. Now, we have used it internally at Complete IT, and it does work really well, but I think once that they may change the way that they operate in terms of that buffer, live events will become a lot more usable for bigger webinars such as this. Live events itself, as I said, you create from your Microsoft Teams client. So you go to the calendar section on the left-hand side of your Teams client, new meeting, and here's where you schedule a normal meeting, or you can select live event, and then you get this following screen. Simple case of what's the title of the webinar, the date it is, a little bit of an information, and then of course who the organizer is going to be, the role they're going to have. So we've got producer, and then however many presenters you would like, and then you basically next and finish that, and you will then receive a link that you can then send out to all of the attendees you'd like to access this. You can also actually create this webinar so that it's only available for internal use, so it's not publicly accessible. Even if somebody outside has a link, they won't be able to access it without logging in with an internal username and password. So it makes it quite internal ones secure if you wish them to be. So we can quickly see that. Calendar. Yeah. New meeting at the top right here. Oh God, live demos, eh? Doesn't display on this one. Took that off my one, but that's why I put it on here in the first place. Sorry. That demo event doesn't have the correct license for it, but essentially that's why I put the screenshots here. So click live event from here, and you get it up. So it's just then simply, like I said, a link, and then people join that when it's time for the webinar to start. Here's the other options touched upon: organisation-wide, public event, or specific people. We can allow recording of it, so as said, it records into Microsoft Stream, and we can also translate, so we can have captions that translate English to up to 6 different languages if we want. So if we've got multinational people connecting in, then we can translate it if we so wish. We can enable an engagement report, so we can see how people how engaged people were within the event, whether they clicked out of their window and were working on something else. And of course we can apply a Q&A. And if we really want to, if it's a particularly large event, we can actually then integrate with an external Apple device to produce it through hardware in a more of a kind of a bit for a better audio visual experience. But that really would be for, if you're presenting more kind of TV style event. But of course the lag will then disappear, but that's quite rare that you want to use that, but it is available if you so wish to use it. And then when you're running the event, this is what the producer view will look like. So at the bottom here, we will have all of the presenters that are available. And then on the left-hand side here, we have what we're stacking up to, or to put to the live screen next. And on the right-hand side is currently what is live. So you can select from your presenters, and you might have lots more than this. And the content they're sharing, you can put it up into what's called the queue here. And when you click the send live button, it then goes to the actual live event itself, which the attendees will see. So you can make sure everything's looks correct before you make it live. And there's a little option here where you can actually also add the content that a presenter is sharing alongside their webcam if you wish, so that you can see them as well as their content when they're presenting. So a few new features coming out. So the first is Breakout Rooms, and that's quite a nice feature, especially in the education world, but also for corporate, where you can have kind of sub meetings within your main meeting. So if, for example, you take a college class that might have 20 odd people in it, and you're undertaking some remote work in these times, you might have a bit of a session with all 20 people in a meeting, and then you might want to break out into smaller groups like you would do in a classroom environment. So what the meeting organizer can do is create what's called breakout rooms or sub meetings, as many as they like, and they can name those as they like, and then add a certain number of people to each of these meetings. And when the presenter is ready, they can then enforce that people move into those sub meetings or breakout rooms, and then those people then work together on whatever topic or subject that they've been assigned to. And the presenter at this point can then provide a time limit for them to complete their work. The presenter can jump into each of the rooms to see how they're getting on, etc. And then the presenter can also force those people back out into the main meeting. So this is something quite useful for education, but also for things like big corporate meetings, where again you might go into little smaller sections to get certain tasks or certain work done. Saves having to create other separate meetings yourself, which makes it more difficult for kind of meeting organisers to jump in to see how you're getting on. But this is a nice new feature coming. It's being rolled out as we speak. So hopefully, when Microsoft roll features out, they don't do it to all the tenants at once. It's just over a period of time. So in the near future, you should start to see the ability to create breakout rooms via this similar sort of icon that you can see up here, the little squares. Another smaller but useful feature is transfer of meetings. So you obviously, say we're working from home, you go downstairs, make a cup of coffee, and Teams rings on your mobile phone, and you answer it. You go back up to your office room, and you want to be able to transfer this to your call to your desktop, rather than having to hang up and rejoin. So when you open up your desktop app, it will know that you're already on a call on your mobile, and you can simply click join, and it will then transfer that call to your desktop seamlessly without the other people in the conversation knowing. And even if you want, you can have the call going on both your mobile and desktop at the same time if you so wish. Completely up to you. Noise control. Might not sound much, but actually this is vastly improved recently. Again, working from home, we've probably all had kids in the background, pets in the background making a noise when it's kind of inconvenient when you're on a meeting. There is now some nice new voice control for Windows, and we've tested this out on high. So if you have noise control off, I'm speaking now, and if I kind of scratched off a packet of crisps, you'd hear a horrible crunchy noise. I've actually tested it and put it on high, and with the packet of crisps, and the crisps couldn't be heard. So it really does do quite a bit of noise cancellation now, which is very useful if you're working in noisy environments, so people don't hear what's going on around you. So I don't know what the high version, how much hit that will have on your resources in your device, but from the testing, it's actually can be quite useful in certain circumstances. And then finally, a kind of mute attendees. We've had that for a long time. So if you're in a meeting, you can actually mute all attendees, or the organizer can, but then they can quite quickly unmute themselves. And if you're having a large meeting, there's always people that have accidentally left their mics on, or just keep enabling their mics, and there's background noise, etc. But you can now enforce that attendees cannot unmute themselves, and only the presenter or the organizer can actually do that for them. It's not a biggie, but a kind of small little feature. And it will, if someone raises their hand in the meeting using a little hand button, it will then ask the presenter to unmute them if they wish. So quite a nice little feature there. I mean, there's all these little things you don't hear about that often, but it's all quite usable, and it makes the experience of using Teams and working remotely a lot nicer, and you get these little kind of features that come about. One thing I just wanted to touch upon, which I should have covered earlier, but when we go to create a new team, just wanted to show you the different types. I meant to cover this at the start. So we can create teams from scratch, which is a complete blank team with one channel, the general channel, or we can use templates. And Microsoft have recently deployed a bunch of templates that align against specific requirements that you may need to use, so you can look at these and see how they work for you. Or we can choose to create from an existing group or team, and from that we can create our own templates. So for example, if our widget company team had lots of customization that we wanted to repeat for lots of different teams, we could actually create the widget company, create the structure, create the tabs, and create what we wanted in there, and then it would actually make a copy of that, which will save quite a bit of time if there's quite a bit of configuration within that. It won't copy data, and if in the widget company you had any private channels, it won't copy those, but quite a useful way to kind of rinse and repeat if you require, without having to spend quite a bit of time reconfiguring everything manually. So once you've got a team correct and the structure you'd like, you can just provide that, use that, keep that as a template if you so wish. So we've got to kind of our 50 minutes in. We're going to leave a few minutes for some questions. If anyone has any, then please ask. I've got one here. Hold on, I'm just going to read that. So, is Teams voice available without any additional licensing? No. So Teams voice has plans, different licensing plans. So in addition to your regular Microsoft 365 plan, you also have to purchase what's called a Microsoft phone system, and then also calling minutes plans. So each user who would like to be assigned with a phone number will need a specific Microsoft 365 phone system plan, and then be assigned with a calling plan. And for those people that have the same calling plans, all the minutes included in that will be pooled. So if you get 5,000 minutes each, and you've got 10 people, you go up to 50,000 minutes as a pool. Anything that's got a phone number such as that's not a human as such, so it's like an auto attendant or a call queue, is free of charge, and you just have to create kind of resource accounts for those, similar that you do with email accounts. So it does cost, but the recording plans do have quite a large amount of minutes included with them, and you can mix and match those as you require. Teams rooms, how much, sorry, stretch this box out. What hardware is required for Teams rooms? Well, the hardware that's required is there's specific packages of hardware, so you can't just go and put in any old device in to work with Teams rooms. Before in September, Microsoft had their Ignite conference where they launched quite a number of hardware products and services around Teams rooms. So they packaged up with different manufacturers, supported Teams rooms packages, which included mics, microphones, webcams, the PC requirement, and of course tablets, etc. So they have a number of endorsed hardware manufacturers, and actually on the Microsoft website you can actually select the size of room you've got, and then it'll give you the recommended package for that. Prior to that, there are particular vendors such as Logitech that have supported devices, and there were things like for the actual compute side, you had to use things like Microsoft Surface tablets or specific Samsung or HP tablets to work correctly with Teams rooms. But Microsoft has developed their Microsoft Teams rooms, which announced in Ignite in September, with these additional kind of manufacturer partnerships, where they now have full packages, which is a lot simpler because you know what you need, and you can just obviously go and find go to your vendor and purchase those. That's it for the questions. I'll hang around for a minute or so just to see if there's anything else. Hopefully you can see that there's quite a lot you can do outside of the instant messaging, voice calls, video conferencing, over and above that of especially with Skype for Business, for those of you who still use that. Like I said, we still use it, Complete IT use it extensively for a lot of collaboration as well as meetings, and lots of our clients we've helped now better use it through that, given that it's so accessible across multiple platforms and makes it easy for people just to access data or applications or collaborate on the fly if they wish. Just pick up a tablet and it's all there for you, and you don't have to open it all up. But yeah, if you want to discuss anything further, just do speak to your Sharp account manager, and we can arrange something if necessary. Thank you very much.